It all started at a wedding. Not our wedding, but the wedding of a close friend. I was just a plus one, feeling a bit out of place in the sea of strangers, when I saw her. Emma. She was sitting across from me at the reception, chatting animatedly with the people around her. Her laughter was infectious, and something about the way she held herself made me feel like I needed to know her. We got to talking that night, mostly about our shared love for travel, our favorite books, and our similar sense of humor. By the end of the evening, we were inseparable. It wasn't long before we became the best of friends, inseparable at social gatherings, constantly texting and making plans. Our connection was undeniable. Months passed, and one day, I found myself standing in front of her, realizing that my feelings had grown into something more. I didn't hesitate. I told her how I felt. To my relief, she felt the same way. We began dating soon after, and before long, we were inseparable in a way that went beyond friendship. It wasn't some grand fairy tale, but it was perfect for us. A simple ceremony surrounded by the people who mattered most. Emma and I were the picture of happiness. I thought I had everything I could ever want. A loving wife, a beautiful home, and a life that many would envy. In my mind, I never even questioned it. Why would I? Our life was good, better than good. It was perfect. So when I walked into that room, that awful, fateful room, I couldn't fathom how everything I thought I knew about us could crumble so quickly. The moment I saw them together, my wife, Emma, and my best friend Chris, it was like the world stopped. I should have felt anger, rage, betrayal, but I didn't. All I felt was this overwhelming numbness, a sense of disbelief that I couldn't shake. I had spent the last few years thinking everything was fine. Our marriage was solid. Our connection was strong. I had no clue that Emma had been slipping away, seeking something I couldn't provide. What was I missing? What did I lack that made her turn to him? These thoughts consumed me as I stood there, watching them. It wasn't just the act that hurt. It was the way she didn't seem surprised to see me. She looked at me with pity, almost like she was waiting for me to say something, to react. But I couldn't. Words didn't come to me. All I could do was stand there, feeling like a complete fool for not seeing it sooner. Chris, my best friend, someone I trusted implicitly, was the one in our bed with her. The betrayal cut deeper than I could have imagined. But even more haunting was the realization that I hadn't seen the cracks in our relationship. I had been blind to the signs, too focused on the idea of what we had, not the reality of it. Did I not give her enough attention? Was I too wrapped up in work? I left the house that day without saying another word. I didn't want to shout, didn't want to scream, because what good would it have done? Instead, I walked away. But inside, my mind was a storm of emotions. The shock, the disbelief, and the crushing weight of knowing that the life I thought I had was a lie. As I walked out of the house that day, the air outside felt suffocating. I couldn't breathe. Not because of the tightness in my chest, but because of the weight of the reality I was now facing. My mind was spinning in a haze, my thoughts scattered and jumbled like shattered glass. Was this a dream? I kept asking myself. No, this is real. She's really with him. My wife. My best friend. I didn't look back as I stepped into my car. I didn't want to see the house, to see the place that once felt like home, now tainted with a horrible truth. But as the engine hummed to life, all I could hear in my mind were the questions that were suffocating me. The simple, naive thought hit me like a ton of bricks. I had been so sure of us, so confident that our love would last. We'd been best friends before anything else, and I thought that was the foundation. We understood each other in ways that no one else did. But in the silence of that moment, as I sat in the car with my hands clenched tightly on the wheel, I realized I was wrong. Was I too boring? Too predictable? I thought about the little things, the times she'd asked me to do something different, the subtle hints that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't getting everything she needed. But I never listened. I was always too caught up in my own world, my own work, to pay attention to what she wanted. I never thought that the cracks I was ignoring could become a chasm. Had I been blind to the signs all along? I couldn't shake the image of her, laughing in my best friend's arms. Was this something that had been building for a while? Was I that out of touch with her? My thoughts kept spiraling. How long had she been unhappy? How many times had she lied to my face, telling me everything was fine? I thought we were happy. I thought I was enough. The pain I felt was unbearable, worse than anything I could have imagined. It wasn't just the betrayal, it was the devastation of realizing that the life I had built with Emma wasn't what I thought it was. The trust, the love, the commitment. Was it all just a facade? And then there was Chris, my best friend. The man I confided in, the man I trusted with everything. He knew me better than anyone, or so I thought. I never saw it coming. I had always believed that no one would cross that line with me, not him. He was supposed to have my back, not my wife's. The more I thought about it, the more I realized how much of a fool I had been. I had been living in a dream world, blind to the reality of our relationship. Emma had been planning this, orchestrating it, while I was stuck in my own bubble of security. I thought everything was fine, when it was anything but. What now? I didn't have the answers. I couldn't even think straight. I drove aimlessly for hours, trying to escape the whirlwind of emotions. But no matter where I went, the pain followed me, clinging to me like a shadow. I knew deep down that this wasn't just a betrayal of trust. It was a betrayal of everything I had believed about love and marriage. I didn't know where to go from here, but one thing was certain. I couldn't go back to that house. I couldn't go back to a life that no longer existed. The night felt endless as I wandered through the streets, unsure of where I was going or what I was even trying to find. I couldn't go back to that house, not after everything that had happened. Emma's lies, the betrayal, and the overwhelming sense of being completely blindsided. Every streetlight I passed felt like a reminder of how out of control my life had become. At some point, my thoughts drifted to one thing: revenge. It was the only thing that made sense now. I had been betrayed by the two people I trusted most in this world. And though the pain was unbearable, there was a part of me that felt an insatiable hunger for justice. I couldn't just let this go. They had taken so much from me: my peace, my trust, my sense of self. It wasn't just about getting back at Emma. It was about showing her that she couldn't destroy me without consequences. And Chris, my best friend, how could he betray me like that? He knew everything about me, my vulnerabilities, my struggles. And yet he chose to stab me in the back. But I had to be careful. This wasn't about rage. It wasn't just about lashing out in the heat of the moment. No, I had to be calculated. I had to make sure they felt the weight of what they had done, without giving them the satisfaction of seeing me break. They will regret this, I thought. Both of them will. The first step in my plan was clear. I needed to gather information. I had to know everything about their affair. Every little detail. I needed to understand how long it had been going on, how deep their deception ran. Emma had thought I was just some oblivious husband, living in the dark. Well, now I was the one pulling the strings. I started by doing what I could never do before: investigating. I knew it wasn't a healthy mindset, but I had to know. The phone records, the receipts, any little clue that could expose the truth. And when I found what I was looking for, it was worse than I had imagined. There were texts, emails, conversations that painted a picture of betrayal I couldn't have comprehended. They had been planning this for months, maybe even longer. Emma and Chris had been meeting behind my back, talking about how they'd keep it under wraps so I wouldn't suspect anything. They'd laughed at my ignorance, at how easily they had manipulated me into thinking everything was fine. And then it hit me like a slap across the face. I was a fool. I had trusted them both with everything, and they had both betrayed me in the worst way possible. But I wasn't just going to let it end like this. They had underestimated me. They thought I was weak. Now I would make them feel what it was like to be caught in their own lies. The next few days were a blur. I kept my distance from Emma, maintaining a cold, emotionless exterior. I couldn't let her see my pain, couldn't let her think she still had any power over me. But inside, I was seething. The rage was building, and I knew it was time to take action. I'd already started taking steps behind the scenes. I knew where Emma was going, who she was meeting, and when she'd be vulnerable. I had a plan in mind. I just needed the right moment. And when that moment came, I would make sure both Emma and Chris understood the consequences of their actions. They would regret every second of their betrayal, and I would be the one to make sure they did. As the days passed, I began to feel like I was slowly regaining control of my life. The anger, the confusion, and the heartbreak still gnawed at me, but I could sense the endgame approaching. I was prepared. I had collected the evidence, carefully building my case against Emma and Chris. I was ready to confront them, to destroy the life they had built on my betrayal. But just as I was about to put my plan into motion, something unexpected happened. Something I didn't see coming. One evening, I received a text. The number was unfamiliar, but the message was clear. Meet me. I have something you need to know. It was from an unknown source, but my gut told me it was something important. Against my better judgment, I agreed. I met the person at a local bar. A man in his mid-40s, wearing a simple jacket and glasses. He looked like someone who didn't belong in my world. A stranger with too much knowledge. "You don't know me," he said, his voice low, almost cautious, "but I know you and I know everything that's been going on." I was taken aback. My mind raced. "Who was this? Who are you?" I demanded, trying to keep my cool. But inside, a storm of questions swirled. Was this someone from Emma's past? Or maybe someone connected to Chris? The man sat back, his fingers playing with his drink. "You don't know everything. There's more to your wife's betrayal than you think." My heart skipped a beat. "What?" "I know you've been planning your revenge. he continued. But there's a twist. Emma and Chris, they aren't the only ones you need to be worried about. He slid an envelope across the table, and I took it with trembling hands. Inside were photos. Photos of Emma and Chris, yes, but there were more. Another set of photos, ones that I hadn't expected. A picture of me from a few months ago leaving my office with a mysterious woman. And the photos weren't just random shots. There was a whole sequence leading to a hotel room. I could feel my pulse racing as I recognized the woman in the photos. It was someone I had met during a work trip. Someone I'd spent time with. Someone I'd flirted with and had maybe gotten a little too close to. But nothing had ever come of it. How did they know about her? "This is a little gift," the man said, with a knowing smirk. "It's not just Emma and Chris you need to take down. It's you too." I froze. The realization hit me like a freight train. The photos weren't just about exposing Emma. They were about destroying me as well. Whoever was behind this knew everything, knew how to pull all the strings. The man leaned in closer, his voice dropping even lower. "You've been played, Liam, and now you have to decide. Do you want to get revenge on them, or do you want to protect yourself from your own mistakes?" I left the bar feeling dizzy, my mind spinning with the implications of what I had just learned. What had I done? How had I been so blind to my own mistakes? For the first time in a long time, I was confronted with the stark reality of my own actions. I had been so focused on Emma and Chris, on their betrayal, that I had forgotten about my own. Now, I had to face the possibility that I was just as guilty as they were. The man's warning echoed in my head. It's not just about revenge anymore. It's about your own survival. Suddenly, my carefully constructed plan seemed meaningless. How could I go forward with it when I, too, had played a part in this mess? Was I a hypocrite? Just another person trying to escape their own guilt? I couldn't just destroy Emma and Chris without first confronting myself. I had to decide. Would I continue down the path of revenge, or would I own up to my own mistakes and try to fix what I had broken? The shock of the twist didn't paralyze me. It hardened me. I had been betrayed, humiliated, and played for a fool. Emma, Chris, and even my own actions had led me to this point. And while the guilt over my own mistakes gnawed at me, it wasn't enough to make me turn back. I couldn't allow them to think they had won. They had hurt me, torn apart my life, and now it was time for me to make them feel the consequences of their actions. I spent days in a haze of contemplation, piecing together my next move. The photos from the mysterious man haunted me, but I couldn't let them dictate my fate. They were only part of the story, part of a game that had already been set into motion. I had no intention of letting Emma and Chris walk away unscathed, and now I had an even bigger reason to act swiftly. The first part of my plan was to take the information about my affair with the mysterious woman and use it as leverage against Emma and Chris. I couldn't let them keep using my vulnerabilities against me. No. If I was going down, I would drag them with me. I took the photos to a trusted lawyer and made sure I was legally protected. My affair, while a mistake, would not be the thing that would ruin me. They wouldn't get the satisfaction of destroying me just to hide their own shame. The next step was even more personal, more devastating. I reached out to the people Emma cared about most, her family. I'd been hesitant, but after what the man had shown me, I realized that to truly expose her, I needed to lay bare everything. I had to leave no stone unturned. I printed the photos, compiled the evidence of her betrayal, and sent anonymous packages to her parents, her friends, and even to a few people in our social circle. I made sure they saw the truth, the affair, the lies, the manipulation. The ultimate betrayal wasn't just between us, but with everyone who had believed in her. The ripple effect would be devastating. Emma would lose everything. But I wasn't finished yet. No, the best part of my plan was yet to come. The day came when I decided to confront Emma directly. I knew she would have heard the whispers by now. The evidence was out. People knew. But she hadn't heard it from me yet. She still thought she had some control, some power over the situation. I wasn't about to let that happen. I waited for her in the house, calm, composed, as if nothing had happened. She walked in with that fake smile she always wore when she was pretending everything was fine. But I knew her better now, and I could see the tension in her eyes as she stepped inside. "Liam," she said, sounding almost desperate, "why are you acting like this? I know things got messy, but we can fix this. We can still be a family." I let the silence hang in the air, knowing this would be the last time I'd hear those words. "Fix it?" I finally said, my voice steady but filled with a quiet fury. "You can't fix this, Emma. Not anymore." Her eyes flickered with confusion, then panic, as I slid a stack of papers across the table. Documents detailing everything. My affair, her affair, the lies, the manipulation. She looked at the documents, her face drained of color, and I could see the realization hit her hard. There was no coming back from this. "You think you can just lie and cheat without consequences?" I asked, my voice cold, almost amused at how easily she thought she could get away with it. "You've destroyed my life. You've destroyed everything we had. And now I'm going to make sure you never forget it." Her expression changed, shifting from defiance to desperation. "Liam, please, please don't do this," she begged, her voice cracking. "I was wrong, I know, but we can make this work. I can change. Please. I'm sorry." But it was too late. Her apologies meant nothing now. She had already chosen her path, and I had chosen mine. Before she could say another word, I stood up and walked out of the room. The silence that followed felt like an eternity. Emma's cries faded into the distance, but I didn't care. This was my revenge. The one thing that would finally give me back control over my life. As I walked away from the house that once held everything I loved, I knew I was walking away from more than just a marriage. I was walking away from a life of lies, from the woman who had betrayed me and the man who had called himself my friend. They thought the Nader could break me, humiliate me, and get away with it. But in the end, I had won. I had exposed the truth, dismantled their false world, and made sure the price they paid was one they would never forget. Emma, Chris, and even my own mistakes had led me to this point. But it was I who would decide how the story ended. I may have lost my marriage, but in that moment, I realized something. Sometimes revenge isn't just about hurting those who wronged you. It's about reclaiming the power you thought you'd lost. Months passed, and life started to settle into a new routine. I no longer saw Emma or Chris, and the weight of their betrayal didn't hang over me the way it once had. The divorce was final, and the aftermath of my revenge had caused ripples throughout our social circles. People knew the truth, and the shame they tried to hide could no longer be swept under the rug. But even as I moved on, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed in me. The quest for revenge had consumed me for a while, but now I found myself thinking about the future. I had learned some valuable lessons about trust, about forgiveness, and about how fragile relationships could be. My life wasn't perfect, but it was mine. And for the first time in a long time, I felt free. After everything had unraveled, Liam found himself standing on the precipice of a new life. His quest for revenge had been long and painful, but it had given him the closure he needed. The betrayal, the lies, the manipulation, he no longer had to carry them. Emma and Chris were nothing more than ghosts from the past now, their shadows fading as Liam stepped into a future that was his to shape. The months following his divorce were filled with quiet healing. Liam focused on rediscovering himself, his interests, and his passions. He reconnected with old friends, started traveling again, and even picked up a few hobbies he had long neglected. His work became a refuge, something he could pour his energy into without the weight of deceit holding him back. One day, as Liam walked through the park, he caught sight of a woman sitting on a bench reading a book. There was something about her, something kind and unpretentious, that made him stop. He struck up a conversation, and for the first time in a long while, he felt the spark of genuine connection. It wasn't a rush, it wasn't a rebound. It was simply two people sharing a moment. As the days turned into weeks, that connection grew. Liam wasn't rushing into anything. He had learned too much from his past mistakes to jump headfirst into another relationship. But with every conversation, with every shared laugh, he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time: hope. Liam realized that revenge, while satisfying, was only a chapter in his story. Now it was time for a new beginning, one of peace, of trust, and maybe even love, if he was ready for it. The past would always be there, a part of who he was, but it no longer defined him. He had reclaimed his life, and now he was determined to live it on his terms.